how many would personally. Thank you very much. Continue. Okay, so we were not sure how many would show up. I estimated 10. I thought, oh, they've forgotten about me, or they're all scared they're going to get COVID or something like that. So, which is fine. But we thought we would try to do something live and see if we could record it as well, so that down the road, for any number of reasons that you couldn't get here and became sundry others, you would be able to still attend. Or if I say something particularly brilliant, you can now listen to the recording or tell your friends to listen to the recording. So what I'm going to talk about this morning is things that I think might be helpful to you that I've kind of picked up in the monastic life. There's a big difference I have found in when I went there in the summertime, which was usually about 3 months. I've been doing that for 17 or 18 years. What I was finding was that I would go from the world of Boulder, which was, as we all know, the world of Boulder, it's talking, it's activities, it's events, it's so on and so forth, and doing public masses and preaching and that sort of thing, and going up to the monastery and saying, oh, I like the quiet and the peacefulness, but I was never there long enough. I didn't discover this till later, long enough to really get into it. I would come out of it in September, and often what I noticed the difference is that I often look forward to getting out and going someplace with somebody when I was up there. Because that was kind of, it was a hybrid life of, yeah, I want some silence and solitude, but I want to go out and do some things as well. But when I stayed there longer, I suppose part of it was the COVID thing. At least that's what I thought it was, that, oh, COVID, you're not going anywhere anyway. But what the COVID did is it allowed me to feel comfortable not going someplace because I knew I was not missing anything. There was nothing out there to go to. I literally had to get in my car every week or so and just drive it around just to run the engine a little bit. So outside of going to doctors, I don't think I really saw anybody. I didn't go to any restaurants. There was no events to go to, and so on and so forth. So I really got into it, and I found out that it's really a, if you would, I have an affinity for it. And as I began to, I didn't try to reflect back on my life, but just what happens with solitude and silence is, and I guess the prayer, is things come up somehow. They're buried in your mind and so on. And you remember certain events and happenings, and you realize that those were all invitations to a life of more solitude and stillness and prayer, that kind of prayer. We talk at the monastery. It's not all not talking. We have plenty of times for talking, sufficient for everybody. But it was just a way of life, considering that we do get up about 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning, that, you know, you got a long time during the day. So I would see that there were indications in my life that said, oh, you have an affinity for this, but I was too either young, immature, stupid, whatever it was, to know. And so I would misinterpret things as loneliness and try to escape it, rather than an invitation to be with myself and this presence that I call God. So, and on the way, there's a book that I recommend called The Way of Chunksa by Thomas Merton. Very skinny book, by the way. And one of the things that I think might be helpful, to him, this was his favorite book. Now, it's a book that you can pick up, say you bought it now, and it's available at our bookstore, I hope, at the monastery. In any case, you can buy this book and you can read some of the poems, let's call it, the Sayings of Chunksa, translated by Thomas Merton, not from the original language, Chinese or whatever, but from he'd read it in English or French, because you can read, and then he would translate it into something that made sense to him. So it's his translations of it. But you'd pick up this book and you read it, you say, that makes absolutely no sense. I don't understand what the guy's talking about. Put the book aside, pick it up in a year. And if you keep after this prayer, at some time, the aha is going to come on, and it's going to start making sense to you. Now, so to get a little bit more into now, what is it that can help you that I'm learning? Your vocation, that is our call in life. We always say, what am I supposed to be? I said at one point I was going to be a Paulist priest. The real vocation, and I think it takes time to figure this out, at least that's my experience of other people, and certainly my experience of myself. Our vocation is to become who we are. Become yourself. That is, for a believer like me, there is a creator God who made me to be me for a certain purpose. If I don't do that purpose will not be done by someone else. It will go undone. It's not the same as saying, well, if you don't clean up, someone else will come and clean up. It's that becoming your unique self, but not in the sense of I'm unique, which is just the egocentricity, but through humility, which we'll get into that. You become yourself, and that's your goal. That's what you're supposed to be. And what will happen is when you begin to grow into this sense of who you really are, who God made you to be, you will be accused of inconsistencies. Because what people see, they etch in stone. And so if you don't follow that, because they want a sense of security, a sense of control. They don't want surprises from the world out there. So they like people to be a certain way once they have figured you out. And so if you don't continue to be that way, they will accuse you, say, of inconsistencies. They may accuse you of some other things too, but that you seem inconsistent to them. But that's all part of your evolving into being who you are. Rilke wrote the Book of Hours, a bunch of poems, R-I-L-K-E, also at our Snowmaster Trappist bookstore, said, I am the impression that will change. And that's I like that. I am the impression that will change. Whatever impression you have of me, not like an ink stain, is going to change because I am going to continue to grow into who I am. And therefore, there is no really going back to normal. I was thinking about this in terms of the COVID, and what people were saying is, I can't wait to get back to normal. And what I was thinking about is, I remember from over a year ago, before the pandemic affected us, normal was, I'm too busy to do this. I don't have time to do that. A world full of worries, and a lot of that was, I think, because, and people rushing around, which we're beginning to see again, a lot of that was trying to be everything for too many people and situations, and not just being who you are, which is a little bit simpler life, I think. So there is no going back to normal. Father, when are you going to come back here? And then they say whatever it is that they want, whatever that is. And because that's how you're known. And they don't really want you to be other than that kind of thing. So I say, well, I'm up there, and how long? In other words, let's get you in a box. How long? I don't know how long. And you could call it a phase. It just is what it is. And becoming a Paulist priest, I don't think I'll ever not be a Paulist priest. I don't think I'll be a Paulist priest like I used to be a Paulist priest. That's all. But I don't see myself becoming a Trappist, joining the Trappists. I don't see that. But I see myself, so I don't fit in some ways, this or that. But I still think I'm becoming who God called me to be. That is, I'm changing into myself. This is what I think is important for you to think about in your own life, changing into who you are. And when there's transitions in your life, those transitions are often looked at as failures, as dark times, as unfortunate moments. Becoming a widow or a widower, becoming divorced, moving from one city to another, changing a job. It might all be looked at as, they could be looked at as problematic, a loss, rather than as an well, and it could be, I'm going to say a widower is a loss, but at the same time, I mean, there's a lot of loss that I have being here with you on a more regular basis and so on and so forth. But within the loss is a nugget of opportunity to look at yourself and say, and now, how will I grow more into myself that I had with this partner, for instance, or with this job, or with this town, so on and so forth? How can I grow more into being who God called me to be at this time in my life? So I think that's a way to look at it as well. So I don't dwell on what's lost or what I'm trying to get, because you don't know that either. But what you're trying to be, I think, is important. Trying to be who you are, who God made you to be, that kind of thing. So you begin to live instead of thinking about how I'm supposed to live, which is often, what do you want? How am I supposed to be with you people? How am I supposed to live? Who am I supposed to be? And how am I supposed to look? I said this at a little homily the other day. It was about the fruit on the tree. And Jesus was talking about a good tree does not bear bad fruit. What everybody looks at is the fruit, because it's what they see. But the fruit will not be good unless a lot of work is being done underground by that tree, on the roots. And you don't see the roots, and you don't see the work of the tree. But that's where the effort has to be. And that's what the more contemplative, silent life is about, is so that you can look like God wants you to look instead of like someone else wants you to look. And we spend a lot of time dressing up for someone else and not for ourselves, if you will. So at the monastery, one thing is you don't have any need to wear any particular clothes. And when we're in choir with our long robes, you could have your underpants on. Who knows? Who cares? So it's of no interest. But if I were to go into church to say Mass, I'll tell you, sure enough, someone will say, Father, why don't you have your collar on? What's your problem? Why do I have to wear my collar? Because that's the way you see priests. Now, I don't have anything against collars or for collars. It's just an example of how people try to pressure you into looking a certain way to suit them. And we're not in this life to suit anybody but God. This was the problem of Jesus Christ. He wouldn't suit other people, and so they killed him. So don't look around for a lot of people to accept you or accept what's going on with you if you are truly becoming who God made you to be, which is why I think we need the contemplative life, the roots. You really need the contemplative life, because in one of the things that I find happens, I don't think I can get much farther than this. All right, I'll just stay here. So one of the things that I think happens when you're doing this prayer on a regular basis is, and you have enough silence and stillness during the day, and I think it's available if we just let it happen, if we just don't fill it in with stuff. See, we have no TV there. We have no radio there. So we don't have these kinds of things that you often can put on to fill up the silence and the solitude. But you just begin to find out with extending this prayer to where you kind of almost have a sense of God is with me. They say you'll get a sense of God walking around being with you all day long. And I say, yeah, that's not going to happen. But it does start to happen. And what I think God does, if I'll just say for myself, if God senses we're really into this thing to be who God made us to be God's will, God will reveal the mess of our lives. It'll come up. Because I already know my mess. I said, there's more. It's deeper. And God will reveal it. And that's what keeps us humble. That's what keeps us humble. We can look back on some things and see, oh, wow, it allows for humility, because it's just between you and God. And and you don't want to forget some of those things. Why did I ever do that? And you don't want to forget it because you don't want to fall back into it and repeat it. So what I think is, if you're into this prayer, there'll be enough humility from revelations of self, of past, that you won't get so full of yourself. We don't want to become this unique. I'm unique. I'm special. I'm different. It's none of that. Because once you do that, you're not really becoming who God called you to be. Because if you do that, the first will be last. You will be the servant of all. You kind of get that. And in Jesus' culture, everybody wanted to escape being last. Everybody wants to escape being the servant. When he was crucified, they crucified slaves. Roman citizens, they just chopped your head off. It was quick and easy. Paul was a Roman citizen, chopped his head off. Peter was a Jew, hung him on a cross. So Jesus, he was willing to be all he was called to be. He said it in the scriptures. Just read it. So, but you rebel against that in a culture that tells you to get ahead, be number one, compete, and so on and so forth like that. There's a difference between the best you can be and beating someone. And a lot of it's attitude, and a lot of it's the energy that you'll put into it. You'll put energy into becoming who God made you to be on a daily basis. You might put energy into being the best ballet dancer until you are. And then at some point you'll say, okay, I got that. What's next? Or now I'm too old to be the best ballet dancer. But you're never too old to be yourself. And for some of us, like myself, it takes a long time. So the monastic life is seen as an escape, but I see it as a cure. The silence and stillness is a cure from what you were trying to be that isn't you. I think of Thomas Merton. Everybody's heard of Thomas Merton, I guess. So Thomas Merton just was always trying to, I don't know when he originally went in, but at some point, he even said it. He was the novice director, and he said it to novices, you're not here to be a monk. You're here to be yourself. Find out who that is. And if it seems like you should be a monk as yourself, you'll be a monk. But don't try to be a monk. And I think that's why a lot of guys leave. They try real hard to be a monk, looking at other monks and reading about what monks are supposed to be like. And he says, it's not just looking and reading, it's that prayer, that deep prayer of letting go of your thoughts of your words to God and just trying to be in a space, if you will, not paying attention to you so God can reveal something of what God's will is for you. So he says, you try to become yourself. So are you going to be a monk? No, I'm going to be Terry Ryan. Oh, aren't you Terry Ryan yet? I said, I don't think so. I said, I'm a work in progress. So people are always wanting to know when you're going to do something, when you're going to whatever. And I said, I don't know. So the false self, if you will, and Thomas Merton, not Thomas Keating came up with that. Thomas Merton, the false self is the one who wants to be somebody else. I want to be a monk like. Just be yourself. And the false self is assigned to us, which is why Merton was trying to say, don't try to be a monk because you'll assign some identity to yourself that is not you. Or it goes the other way. I don't want to be like my mother. And so somebody gets married, I'm not going to be like my mother. They have a child, I'm not going to be like my mother. And I said, well, that's a negative way of life. Who are you going to be instead of who I'm not going to be? And most of those women become like their mother. So, because if you don't discover who you really are, you'll become like what you don't want to be, so to speak. And it might be just who you're supposed to be, genetics, whatever. So guys do try to become monks instead of themselves, and they give up and they leave, which is what they're supposed to do since they never found out who they are. And any number of, not so much now, but after I was ordained back in the 70s, a lot of guys were ordained priests. I think they were searching for something, and they didn't find it in the priesthood. And they left, and they did something else. I think it was just an attempt, because the 60s, you're probably too young to remember, but the 60s was a time when you weren't going to be like the 50s, the Eisenhower years. You were going to be like something, and you did that with hair and clothes and words and music. This is my music, and so on and so forth. And you never figured out who you are because you're always trying to fit into something. And so guys got ordained, and they fit into their clothes and their collars, and they stay a few years, and they do some things and say, is that all there is? Well, that's all there is to that. And if it doesn't satisfy you, then get out. Nobody needs a miserable, unhappy priest. Maybe you do, but I don't think so. One only hopes not. We don't need miserable, unhappy monks, which is why you have to go several years. You have to go about 3 years as a novice. The novice is new. After they come in for a few months, if they stay long enough, they become a novice. For 3 years, they're novices. And they're not allowed to go out and talk to the people after Mass. Not until after they get more simply professed as the next level, 3 years. Now stop and think of Jesus Christ. He was 30 years before he went public. And the 3 years that the monks give is you got to take time to figure out some things before you go out and start blabbering with people. And so Jesus, since he's God, said, well, now I'm a human being, and I know how human beings blabber and try to be somebody else. So I'm going to take the 30 years. And then he went out and did his talking. So it's a slow trip to becoming yourself. And we're supposed to become like Jesus Christ, I think is what it says in my religion. So, I got to be quiet sometimes. Not right now, but so you don't want to let the outside world direct your insides. So you've got to be in touch with the insides, which is what I think the deep meditation is about, to get in touch with the insides. In other words, advertising is going to convince you of how you fit in and belong. You don't belong unless you do this. And that was very much the 60s. I'm sure it's still today with young people. I don't know. I'm not that connected to them. But you don't want to let advertising control you. And so it's nice to not have television and radio with all those things going on. And I used to try to play all kinds of things when I was going. It's about a 4-hour trip back and up to the monastery and back. And I used to always try to play something, have something recorded or whatever. And Spotify for music or news or whatever. I don't turn the radio on much at all anymore. I'm more comfortable just being me in the car, and not necessarily even daydreaming. One of the things that I do think on the positive side is you begin to realize the depth of God's love for you, because when God reveals some of the mess of your life, why did I do that? Why am I doing this? God also will reveal how great is God's love, forgiveness, and acceptance. And then we have less of a need to fill ourselves up with stuff that doesn't feed us, sort of the sugar of life. We don't need it anymore, because one of the problems, I think, is we try to fill ourselves up because we don't believe we have enough love. And we have enough love from God, but we don't know it. And of course, when people are telling you you're a rotten human being, need to go to confession all the time to get God's love, that just builds on that attitude. So God's love is revealed, it's never earned. And in the history of Christianity, we have had movements and times and ages when you earn God's love. It was ever so subtly taught to me, and I've talked about this before when I was growing up. You earn God's love. God will get you if you do this. It was a way of controlling you. So the idea that God will get you was a control mechanism from other people to get you to act a certain way to make them feel better. Okay, you're a kid. You don't have much control, and you don't know enough to do anything else. Or you rebel, and then the rebellion, you decide to be like somebody else. Which was the 60s was a lot of rebellion. And then I'm different. And then all the different people look the same in their differences. You still have that down on the mall. You go down on the mall, you'll see some of these teenagers and so on. They all dress the same. They all look the same. But they're not going to be like somebody else. Yes, they are. They're going to be like one another. It's just tough to be yourself. It is. It's a great fight. So the monastery is not an escape. I found that out. It's more of a cure. And the healing of whatever that needs to be healed is, I think, is done to the extent that we abandon ourselves. So Abandonment to Divine Providence is a book that I think is well worth looking at. De Caussade, Decausssade. De Caussade wrote that in the late 1700s, and it was a series of talks. I think he just talked and somebody wrote it down, and it wasn't published till 75 years later. That says something about how ignored abandonment was at that time. You don't abandon yourself to God, but then people realize, yes, abandonment to God, and God can really go to work. Jesus on the cross had abandoned himself and felt abandoned. But look what happened. It was after that you get resurrection. Without a cross, there is no resurrection. Without taking on this tough way of becoming who you are, there will be no becoming who you are. So it's not becoming who you are, it, because God made you that way, but you don't know it, or you're denying it, or you're fighting it, and so on and so forth. But once you get a sense of it, you'll have a comfort zone, because the strength of your prayer is the energy that will hold away the tremendous powers of society to control you for their own benefit. So I'm trying not, people think, and I thought this at one point, if I stay in the monastery, I'm really abandoning the people. I'm fleeing the people. I'm not being of service. And a couple of things came out of that. Who am I? God. God will do just fine. At some point I'll be dead anyway. But I think of not so much fleeing the world as becoming the gift for the world that God made me to be. So the sense that I would be in the monastery forever, I'm not so sure of that. But I sure as heck don't want to be what somebody else wants me to be. That's not really who God wants me to be, that sort of thing. So, but at the same time, I don't ask anybody else to be my kind of priest. I can just simply say, I don't agree with the way you do things, or it's just and I realize it's an opinion. It's an opinion. It's not gospel. Or you do things differently. You have a different style. You were brought up in a different tradition. You have a different upbringing. So your way of being priest, let's say, is different than mine because we're different people. And you're going to reach people I'll never reach, but I'll reach people you'll never reach. And that's a good way to be church, as opposed to, you priests were all wrong. I'm God's new gift to the world, and I'm going to fix all your mistakes. That's the arrogance that you don't want. And I remember when I was ordained, one of the things God reveals to me in case I forgot it, when I got ordained, I said, all you old guys, old was over 50 at the time, all you old guys have screwed up the church. And especially I included a couple of other people, a couple of guys around my time of ordination. We're going to fix it. And that was just silliness. As if God didn't make me to fix this church. It made me to be me. And so I look back and I see the same thing coming along. Guys, younger guys saying, you guys screwed up the church. We're going to fix it. And I bet those old guys over 50 were looking at young guys like me and says, what jerks? And I was looking at them and says, boy, did they screw up. And, it just goes on and on and on. And what I find is I let it all go. It's all right. Whatever is. My job is to work on me so that I can be more of a gift to other people. And Zoom has really allowed this to happen. I think Zoom was around, but I didn't know about it. And a lot of people weren't using it. Businesses were having their meetings and stuff, but it never occurred to us ordained geniuses that we could actually use technology to get in touch with people. They didn't actually have to come to church where we would pass the collection basket, by the way. But of course, who's thinking of that? You could talk to people. Think of seniors who can't get out because of their situation, the weather, their health. They don't drive anymore. They can't see. Or they can see and they drive, and you don't want them to drive, So you want them to stay home. And Zoom makes the road safer, and so on. So Zoom is a way to teach, and it is a way to stay in touch with people and to be a gift for people, and so on and so forth. As a matter of fact, some people say, I don't like Zoom because I don't like looking at all those little pictures on it. But as a teacher, I like it for the reasons that I said, but also, you look at me now, I all dressed up, right? And spiffied up and over here and everything like that. And I say, when I'm teaching on Zoom, I have my collar on and my underpants and my slippers. And when we take a break, I go get a cup of coffee. What I miss, I don't want to say it's the only reason I'm here because I love you, but what I realize in my selfishness and self-centeredness that is still slightly there, I miss the treats. And the ladies that make the treats. So I hope that you eat not too many of them, but take some up to the monks. Anyhow, no, enjoy it. You know, that's the one thing you don't get. You don't get the good treats. You don't get, and being live does make a difference, but Zoom, and when it's over, I hit leave, I'm done. You know, you're finished. And so on and so forth like that. There's no cleaning up. And so you keep those things in mind. But I want to fulfill the role God wants me to fulfill. I can't fulfill somebody else's role. I can try, and I have tried, and it is very disconcerting. So the surrender to becoming myself, not what others want me to be. Now, I saw that this really started out when I was a little boy. I grew up in the Bronx, in apartment buildings and stuff. But you might see pictures of the Bronx, you think, oh, it was horrible. It wasn't horrible at all, not in the 1940s and their early mid-50s. It wasn't at all. There weren't that many cars on the road. We used to play stickball out on the street. There were hardly any cars parked. My mother would say to me, I remember in the summertime, or not summertime, before I didn't start school till I was 6. She said, go out and play. It was very safe. I think now she just wanted me to get out from under in our apartment. So she said, go out and play. But there were no play dates. You didn't get on the phone and say, Paul, are you available to play? We didn't do that. You just went out and see what happens. And I would go out and there'd be nobody around. It'd be warm weather and all. And the thing that would come to me, because the idea from the culture is I'm a kid and I'm by myself. There must be something the matter with me, because other kids seem to, wherever I get this idea of other kids, seem to always be with somebody doing something. So I would say, I must be lonely. So I felt lonely, but the other thing that I didn't realize later is I didn't mind being with myself. And that was the first indication that I was okay being by myself in this world. And I would go find some things to do and to just enjoy myself climbing a tree, for instance, or I would find myself going and walking in, we had parks in the area, and walking around and those things like that. It never occurred to me that another kid in my same situation would find that horrible. It never occurred to me that way, that I was just getting into being by myself. So a lot of times I was just by myself and didn't mind it, but there was, am I lonely? Am I lonely? And then as you grow up and become a teen, that's really something you want to escape. And so there were many times I tried to escape that were really offered to me by God. I was, I'll just give you another example. There were so many of them. When I was a bachelor, I moved to Chicago. I was a single guy. I moved to Chicago after graduate school of business and got a job. And a lot of times I was by myself and I tried to escape it. And I didn't realize till later that was a real gift that God was giving me. And every now and again, I would just accept being by myself and see it as a possibility. And I would enjoy it. I was probably the only guy that I knew of all my friends who sometimes would just walk into a church and sit down in the middle of the day or something and just sit quietly and feel comfortable. But I don't think I was able to reflect enough on it that this is different. You're not like the people you hang around with, but I hung around with the people I hung around with because that's who I thought I was supposed to be. We're supposed to be having fun, partying. We're single. We're in Chicago. We have discretionary income, as we called it. And it wasn't until I started looking back years later, and I realized all these opportunities that I had to be by myself. So now I said, okay, at this age, I got this great opportunity to be very much with me, and it seems that I like it. And so it doesn't matter that it doesn't make sense to other people, because I'm sure my friends back in Chicago would wonder, why'd you do that? I don't even believe in God. What are you doing in church? That sort of a thing. So that whole sense of becoming yourself makes you much better in terms of being available to others as you, not as whatever. And it makes you a much better listener, I have found. Because it's not so much that you stop talking. That's not listening. Because you can stop talking when another person speaks, but your mind is thinking. You're making decisions about this person. You are judging them, maybe. You are trying to come up with an answer before you even realize that they're not asking a question, because you want to look a certain way. You want them to think you know something, and so on and so forth. So I realized, just listen. Just listen and let God tell you something. So I don't want to get in the way of quiet times and still times that are being offered to me. And so I think then I'm much better for others. And Zoom allows me to be for others, and yet I don't have to be going someplace. I don't have to get on an airplane anymore or drive someplace and so on and so forth. So this way of doing Zoom and in person, I think, is the next step, to try and have hybrid things. But Zoom allows me a lot more time for silence and stillness. So I think a vocation, another way of looking at your vocation, is it chooses us to be who we are. It's another way of looking at it. So I look at the Paulist priesthood as part of the journey. And in a sense, it was the best decision I could make at the time. In other words, I was going to stop working in the world of business because this isn't me. That much I knew. And I thought it was the next step. I couldn't go from there to a Trappist monastery. That would have been insane. I mean, I don't know that I even had the ability to even think that way. I had too much other stuff in the way. But I gravitated to the Paulists, and that was going to be part of the path, because the Paulists are very much people priests. And they like to party. They like the world. They like the culture. You'll never get a homily from a Paulist that says the culture is rotten and you've got to not become part of it. That wasn't us. So it was a relatively easy transition for me to the Paulist fathers. We enter into the culture. Because we're very much believers that God made the world good. There's so many beautiful things in the world. So we tend to go out, we tend to get together, we like to have fun. Many of the old religious orders are like that. The Benedictines, I think, are like that. So I couldn't have gone to the Trappists. And the Paulists were there. That's where I think God was at work. The Paulists were there. I might have been a Franciscan if I had been at Franciscan churches. I was never at a Franciscan church. I had 4 years of Jesuit education, but I thought they took too long to ordain you, and I don't want to go that long. And I don't want to teach high school to jerks like me, which is what Jesuit scholastics end up doing. That's how they keep their high school tuitions low. They make the Jesuits the teachers, and so on like that. I don't want to teach you guys, these jerky kids in New York. The Paulists were it, and it was the right decision at the time, and has been for many years. And then I started the summers in the monastery because I had met Thomas Keating. I didn't try to meet Thomas Keating. I was assigned to Boulder, Colorado. I'd been in Houston, Texas. Very different worlds, by the way. And when I got to Boulder, hippy-dippy place at the 1980, the Buddhists are here, the Hindus are here, all these other religions are here, and they have this Buddhist-Christian dialogue. And since I was interested in meditation, I knew the Buddhists meditated. Well, at least they sat like they, I assume that's what they were doing. I said, oh, I'm going to go to this. And there's Thomas Keating talking. So I went up and introduced myself because I was attracted to whatever he was saying, or however he was, I think. Just another step. Go up to the monastery and visit him. Boom, boom, boom. You just look back and you see God at work. It was just a matter of saying yes at that moment. I could have not gone and met Thomas Keating. I could have said, oh, he's probably too busy. But something in me said, go say hello to that man and ask if you can talk to him. And that's how it works. So it's a matter of thinking, becoming who God made you to be. I think positive, you're in the process. There's little things that happen to move you along to that ultimate place. But at some point, you really get caught up in it. And I don't think we're ever too old for that to happen. And maybe sometimes we need a lot of years for it to happen. So continue to work on it. Don't say, my life's done. Because if your life is done, as far as God's concerned, you'll die. And you're not dead. So God has plans wherever you are. So keep that in mind. I try to. There was a fellow named Boniface, Saint Boniface. He was sent to Germany. He was considered the apostle to the Germans. They were all non-Christians. They didn't know anything about Christianity. So he goes over there, and he goes in. He's in a monastery first. He's a happy man, a monk in a monastery, I think in England. And I think he's even the abbot. Anyhow, he just feels so fulfilled. And at 40, which is kind of old in those days, I mean, back in 600-700s, he wants to be a missionary. That's a big leap. Now, if he was a missionary in England, at least he'd have some place but no, he's a missionary, goes to what's we call Germany now, and at 40 to be a missionary, and he's quite good at it. Maybe he wouldn't have been good at it if he started at 30, but he's good at it now. And he feels that call, that urge. Now, what do you think the other monks thought? This guy's insane. Or, what's he leaving us for? We need him to make our lives more comfortable. But he didn't buy into that. He feels called to do that. He does that now. It's not over yet. He's so successful, the Pope makes him a bishop. So he becomes a bishop, and he's very successful at that. And he's a great administrator, too. Now he's in his late 70s, and he's about 80 years old. Now, who lives to be 80 back then? But he's 80 years old as a successful bishop, and he wants to go back to the missions. See, it's never over. But when he went back to the missions at 80, it wasn't like he was at 40, because he wasn't 40 anymore. He had moved as Boniface to wherever he was going. And he went off, and then he got killed. He got murdered by pagans who didn't like his message. A little bit like Jesus. He would have been safe in either of those other jobs, but he wasn't about safety. And I'm sure when he left his bishop, as successful as he was, people said, oh, our lives are a mess. We lost our bishop. Now we're going to get some jerk. But that's not his job. His job was to go do missions. So I think of him. So whenever you say, I don't know, if Father Terry started about this stuff, I'm too old for this. You're never too old. I don't think so. My sense is when you're too old, you'll die. So don't worry about it. So the monastery has a certain level of stability, which I think is another thing that we can get when we're older, is we can maybe have some stability. A lot of people are worried about losing their jobs. Well, when you're older and you don't have a job to lose, well, then that's one less worry that you have. And if you were in an assisted living place, for instance, certain things are done that you don't necessarily have to worry about. So I think of the monastery as a place of stability, and so that I can have what's referred to as a stability of heart, that your heart can be a little bit still. It's not so much the physiological heart as your interior self gets a stableness from the rhythm of your life, so that in some ways it's easier to get into the prayer because you don't have so much lack of stability that gets in the way. There's very little that happens each day that messes up the entire day. We even have a generator. So when the electricity goes off, which it does, we put our generator on. And so now and again, there's something, there's fires, I think is the big thing now. We have fires up there, so that would be a big issue. And you try to plan for it and all, but by and large, within the monastery life, and I think that's why it has a rhythm to it. And if you can get a rhythm to your life, at least for some period, that will help your prayer, I think, because you'll be less worried and concerned about other things. So for instance, every Friday, I cook fish. And we eat fish at 12:30 in the afternoon, because that's when we have our main meal, 12:30. We don't have our main meal when the cook is ready. We have it at 12:30. And people know if they want to eat it, be there at 12:30. Get into the rhythm. And so I'm going to cook fish on Friday at 12:30 with some other things. And so I'll always check on Thursday what fish is there, take it out, thaw it out, cooking on Friday. I bake bread. So there was a lot of instability in early bread baking. That was stressful. And I was very worried about whether the monks would like the bread. So I got over that hurdle of will the monks like the bread, and over the hurdle of, oh, this didn't turn out so well. I mean, if it really doesn't turn out so well, you put the whole loaf outside in the yard and the birds eat it because they don't care. And it's all fine, and you feed nature. It's great. But you learn how to make breads by making bread. I mean, you learn how to become you by doing some things and seeing how it works. And in other words, I said, okay, I'm here in the monastery now, do monastery and take advantage of the silence and solitude and see where it goes. It wasn't 9 months ago. I said, well, I'm on the way to being myself. 9, 10 months ago, I was on the way to not dying from COVID. That was the energy in part. And it just sort of, you got into it and you find, oh, this is part of the journey. So it's a stability of heart. It's an interior centeredness, I think, that comes with the prayer that is a little bit easier to get into because of the silence and solitude. There's just not a lot of sound around me. And I only notice that when I'm here. And you realize all the sound and so on and so forth. Cell phones don't ring because there's no cell phone service up there. You can call and it takes the message, but I don't get it till I go out on the highway. And then those oh, who's that? So, and the humility, I think God will give you enough humility, speak for myself, so that I never get further along than I am. So that's why I don't say, here's where it's going. Whereas when I was in the seminary, I was going to be ordained a priest. And this is where it's going. Or you're assigned someplace, I'm going to this place. So there's a lot of going to. I'm going to an assisted living place. I'm going to move to Buffalo. So I'm not going to, I'm trying to be. So this sense of how long will you be there is your going to question. And I don't have a going to answer. So I don't want to get further ahead than I am. And I think humility keeps you there because you realize, you know, Terry, you can make a lot of screwy decisions because you've done a lot of screwy decisions when you feel pressure from this, and this. At some point, the Paulist Fathers might call up and say, we would like you to go here to do something, and that may very well be God's will. So I'm not going to say, I can't go there, I'm in a monastery in silence and stillness. That may very well be the next thing. I don't know. They are now doing something in my order where 2 younger guys will go to a parish or a campus ministry parish, something like that, and maybe Las Vegas. In a heartbeat, I'll be there. But otherwise, monastery? What are you kidding me? But and they would like a senior priest to come along to, you know, help out here and there, because I could do my Zoom teaching from anywhere and live teaching and so on and so forth. So, you know, something like that could happen. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. And I think God keeps me there by reminding me of my shortcomings to keep the humility there. So I think everyone's vocation, I don't know, but many of us, our vocation is to accept and take the journey. People say, I'm on a spiritual journey. Well, what's that look like? I mean, because I used to say that all the time. We're all on a spiritual journey. What is that? Well, it's becoming who you are. That's the spiritual journey. And it needs silence and solitude, and then it needs doing some stuff and seeing how it goes. I'm going to sometimes do something on cooking and contemplation. Maybe I'm going to come back. We hope to have one here on September 18th. There is a CU football game at 11 o'clock. I don't think that affects most people in this room. But if it does, you can always get it later. You can record, it'll be recorded. But if I do it, there'll be a game at 11. We'll just start at 9. And, you know, you're here early enough, you're not in the traffic. So, and if they're losing, nobody goes. So what the heck? So, but we hope to do something. Anyway, cooking and contemplation, that what got me on that. Many men, I live with men, I think many men don't cook because they're afraid. It's an ego thing. They're afraid to look like they don't know what they're doing. They're afraid of failure, and failure is you won't like it. And I got over that. And you know what I look back at? And this is where the humility comes in. What a jerk I was. My mother was a great cook, and I never asked her to teach me how to cook. A. And B, my mother would be very busy because at one point she was working, coming home, shopping, and cooking. Never did I ask, Mom, why don't you show me how to do some things, and I'll do them. Do your boys cook? They do. They got over it. I couldn't get over it until later in life. But what I realized was if I trusted that you were going to accept it, I enjoyed it. And I found out I enjoyed cooking. So once you get over that hump, maybe it's some women too, you get over that hump, it's a fear. I asked some guy, why don't you cook something? And then one day I said to him, when you went to the monastery, before you went to the monastery, were you living at home with your mom? Yes. And then you went to the monastery. He said, yes. I said, you've lived your whole life looking for someone to take care of you and feed you. And he still does it. Comes in the kitchen to see if someone's made something that he could eat before he prepares himself what few things he knows how to do. And I think, I don't want, that's not me. He's comfortable that way, but I'm not. I said, I like to cook. And I'll try things, and someone will give me a recipe and so on and so forth. And so I like to cook. I like to bake bread. But there was a time when I wouldn't do those things. And there was a time when I was too busy saving the world to cook or to bake bread. I'm not here to save the world, but I was that person. And now younger priests save the world. I don't bother with that. That's where they are now. So you're saving the world. That's very good. Saving it from me and all my mistakes. So just accept the spiritual journey to become yourself. That's how I think of it. So a mysticism in Christ, sounds like a big thing, is you're not isolating yourself. You're really becoming one with one another because you're getting over duality. That's the big word now, and when they're all talking about contemplative prayer, non-duality. Basically, you're getting a sense of being one with other people. You're less judgmental, you're more accepting, and therefore you're more loving. You're more charitable, you're more kind, you're more compassionate. So I find in the monastery, you're living with different people, and you're living close enough, and you're seeing them over and over again, and you see their ways, and you let it be. You don't get beyond, I wish that guy would, what is that about? So I'd feel better. It's not about me. You just get to accept people. That's the way they are, and accept it and just be. So most of us learn from the outside in. And I think a contemplative life is you are revealed to yourself from within by God. We say, I get an education. You get it. So if you grab it from the outside, we acquire knowledge. We get knowledge. But the contemplative life, just the opposite. Prayer is, we are found by God when we stop running. Now, I'm going to finish with, I don't have my glasses on. What time is it? Oh, I better stop soon. So I try not to wear watches too much anymore either. But sometimes if I had my glass, I'd see, okay, we're going to finish with this. Then we're going to take a break and see if you got any Q&A, because you got to take a break to have a treat. And if you want to support me so I don't go to debtor's prison, you can make a contribution. So I want to say something about centering prayer, which I've often taught and still think is a good thing. It's a method. It is a method. It's the can that holds the nourishment. You don't eat the can. You don't focus on the can. You want the food that's inside of it. The can is necessary to hold the food, maybe, but it's just a can. So don't focus on the can. Don't focus on your method. What I find is focusing on your method is just another control mechanism. If I do this, I can let go of thoughts. If I do this, I'll stop talking. God will help you to let go of thoughts. That's God's job. Your methods are to stop paying attention. That's all you want to do. You're practicing it. You have a little mantra word, a little sacred word. You use it. Maybe in this method, it's simply so you pay less attention. But if you're going to get still and silent within, that's God's job. You're not in control. And so I think it's very important, especially for us Westerners. And what happens a lot is we end up saying, I'm not thinking about my thought. I'm not focusing on my thoughts. It says, no, but you're very self-conscious that you're not focusing on your thoughts. You're self-conscious. You're aware that you are practicing this method. That's okay. That self-consciousness will be relieved by God's grace. So don't worry if you are self-conscious about your method. It's helping you to get a little bit more still, but the ultimate taking you deeper is God's job. Self-consciousness is simply watching yourself and asking if I'm doing it right. That's what happens. That's why I found, am I doing this right? I says, what am I crazy? What am I doing here? So you have distractions. I try to ignore them. And when I ignore them, by my method, they tend to go away or become less lethal. But I'm generally aware that I'm doing this. But it's really God's job ultimately to remove all the obstacles, not your method's job. We receive, we wait, and we try to rest in the presence so that we can get to know our true self and then live it out. And I think that's long enough for now. What we'll do is, okay, we're going to take a break, Chris. We'll take a break of, I guess you have to go to bathrooms and stuff. 10 minutes? 10, no more than 10. 10 minutes, we'll be back and go to the bathrooms and have treats and some coffee. And then we'll see if there's any Q&A.
We'll be back at 10:17.
Questions? There'll be no answers, but there may be questions. I came across all right?
I think so.
Okay. continue to play those two girls now and again, just as a pick-me-up. It was such a good one.
Oh, good.
I never erased it. Every now and then I erased it. Now, there's two happy young people who like God. All right, we have to get back. Welcome back. Oh, all right.
Yeah,
All right, we're trying to get back for the people who are watching on screen. Chris, we're having trouble rounding them all up. Oh, there's Bill. Hi, Bill. There's Bill. Some old St. Tom's people are watching in. As we get back here, let's see if now a couple of people said this really was helpful to them, which is good because I was really trying to, if I was talking about myself, older people would pick up on it for sure. But if you're a younger person, it gives you more time to become yourself, who God made you to be. Do we have any questions? And it doesn't matter if, don't worry if nobody else hears the question, I'll repeat it from up here. So does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask at this point? Otherwise I may, yes?
I just wonder how many monks you're living with. How many are at the monastery?
All right, a question, how many monks are at the monastery? Yes, I guess I haven't said too much about that to fill you in. There are a total of 7 of us, including me, which means there's 6 monks at the monastery. Me, a Paulist priest, that's 7. There's one more monk who lives at a very nice assisted living place, Heritage Village, which is down in Carbondale. And he likes that very much. So he's very comfortable there and where he can get much better care. Right now, nobody lives in our infirmary. Everybody can take care of themselves in that sense. We are now going to have another monk who was an abbot at another monastery, and he's going to begin to live with us, which would make 7 monks. I don't know how long he'll stay. Maybe he'll make it his retirement monastery. But we could hold 25. It was never thought, you think that's a lot, but that's not very many. We were never going to be a big monastery. Even when they built it, they knew it wasn't going to be, they weren't going to have that one of their big ones where you could have 75 monks or something. We don't know what the future holds. That is how much future we would have and so on and so forth. We're trying to get younger monks, but then the question is, one of the questions is, would they want to live with their great-grandparents? Now if he came in at 50, does he want to live with his grandfather? Who's going to be his connected one, unless we were to get several young ones all at once? So that becomes a bit of an issue for us. There are 11 male Trappist monasteries in the United States. There were 12. We closed the one in Utah. Nobody was coming. And we just let the monks get older and older, and then we moved them into other facilities and closed the place. So we still have 11. The question is, one question is this a vocation anymore for people? There's always a possibility that it's not. Or do we think that instead of being a monastery that only holds monks who are Trappists, could we have other people living there? such as the Paulist priests, which would be other men who are not going to become monks. We do have a eighth guy who's not even, doesn't even come to acquire, doesn't vest. He fixes a lot of things on the property. He's a good friend of the monks, and he's living with us now. And he's a great asset for us, and he eats with us, but he doesn't come to choir and vest or anything like that. But so he lives with us. Another question could be, with 3,600 acres and all, would we want to have something where we would have lay people be part of the community, lay couples, for instance, or men and women? We just looking at it that we would have the core of the contemplative focus, and we decided at one point, not this we, but that we, the monks there, at some point they decided they were going to focus on contemplative life and less on manual labor. And when we're part of the Benedictine tradition, when Benedict founded the monastery, so the Benedictines, the Trappist Cistercians, the Camaldolese, the Carthusians, all are based on the Benedictine rule. And that rule had a certain amount of manual labor each day for various reasons, practical and otherwise. And we decided in our way we were going to make our living was we would be less focused on hours of manual labor so we could have more time for the contemplative life. What happened historically in some places was there was so much labor, they didn't focus on contemplative life. They didn't really have it as part of their tradition, even in monasteries. So when a person like Thomas Keating came along and Thomas Merton, they said, well, we read about it, where is it? So some places are trying to get back to that. And so we decided that was going to be it. So one of the reasons that we had retreat facilities was it was a way to have income by building retreat buildings where we could have income, but it only took one monk as the guest master. We don't teach. We're not like the Benedictines. We don't run schools. We don't run parishes. We don't teach. That's not what they do. You go on retreat, monk doesn't come up there and give you a talk on contemplative prayer. That's not what we do. So I'm different in that sense, but that's all right. I'm not trying to be a Trappist. So that's kind of the background and the sense of can we think outside the box? Who knows? I guess we'll wait and see. Other monasteries, Trappist monasteries around the country, have more monks, but they're very old. So it's a little bit like go into many Catholic churches. Okay, I'll take Florida. That's an obvious one. Go into a Florida Catholic church, especially where a lot of the snowbirds live, retired people and such. And you go in that church and they're packed. And look at the average age and ask yourself, who's going to be in that church 15 years from now? Because if you ask those people, and I've done it, how many of your kids go to Mass? Some hands go up. How many of your grandkids go to Mass? Almost no hands. So the future for many places is not look good. So the Trappists are thinking, I guess, or maybe thinking this. They had a meeting this week of consultants, they call them, other big-time monks from around the country to say, what's our future? And they wanted to talk to people who are living on the property who are not monks. We have several who do work for us and all. And say, what do you think? Where do you think we could go? How could we do this thing? And so on and so forth. So we're not trying to recreate the past. It may be gone. And we need to do something different. We don't know. So when they say, would you live there forever? Well, one of the things is I might outlive it. What is forever? Who knows? They may be there 5 more years and then that's all they got. They don't, They said, well, they could send monks from someplace else. Well, they're all old. What is it? So we could end up with just a couple of monasteries in the country for the few young people that are at all interested. I mean, it's not as if we run around the country recruiting or giving talks, telling people how great it is, and so on and so forth. I think Merton was a searcher, so you have to be a searcher. And he ended up going to Gethsemane when he came back to the United States from England and went to school at Columbia University in New York. He went to Gethsemane for a retreat. And that kind of clicked something for him, his readings and his interest, and then what he saw there. And so he applied for Gethsemane. But so we try to get maybe some young people interested in going on a retreat, something like that. Maybe something will click for somebody. Who knows? But we're pretty good they seem to be pretty good at filtering out. They're not hard up. And they don't want a guy who doesn't belong. So a guy comes for 6 months, and if he thinks he fits in and we don't, we tell him not to come back. That sort of thing. So they have to vote you to live with them. So they have to vote for me to stay there. I can't say I'd like to stay here. It's a wonderful place. Fine, we don't care. They have to decide that they want you to stay there. So they want me to be there. They're comfortable with me. So anything else? Yes.
Terry, over the years, you've introduced us to a number of personalities in church history. Some of them readily recognizable, others more obscure. And all of these people fit into the social, political atmosphere of their times. Given the fact that the church is imperfect, and given the fact that our church is facing some social and political issues now, with your reflection on these people from antiquity, have you looked forward and identified any younger thinkers, theological or philosophical, that, in your opinion, could offer our children, to your point, our children or our grandchildren, some spiritual guidance? And if so, would you mention those names?
It seems that most of the people I read have been around a little while. And if they happen to be younger, I've already mentioned them. In other words, when I'm coming upon somebody who I think could say something to us, I never think of how old they are, just that they might have some good points to make. But I think that you would have to be, since we don't have many young ones in the Trappists, I don't see it coming from there. But I would think that if it was going to be from Catholic circles, they would have to be thinking outside the box a little bit. I think that right now, I would suspect maybe the Jesuit, maybe they would be from a Jesuit university. That might be one place, since they always seem to be outside the box. But I don't, there's not some hot person that's coming along now, like there used to be when I was in the seminary. There was a lot of things going on in the 60s and 70s from what we call Vatican II that was new, and there were young guys coming out with stuff. And so there's young guys coming out with stuff, but it's a lot of going back to the past. They have, there's more of a search for certainty. And I find that people like Thomas Merton weren't looking for certainty, because they weren't, that just wasn't their thing. And it was important to find out what made sense to them, which is a lot different than, I have to find out what's right so I feel better, and whatever I think is right, you don't agree, therefore you're wrong. There's no acceptance of different opinions and so on and so forth. So I don't really come across anybody that's particularly young that you haven't heard about already. Yes?
What about broadening the role of women in the church?
Well, yes. Broadening the role of women in the church, I think would be very helpful. And I think this Pope that's in now is trying to empower women, but they still don't have the pulpit. And my sense is the pulpit still is where you can really make a difference in what people are getting and hearing. I mean, I think there's women who are writing quite well. There are women who are teaching at universities. There are women who are getting empowered in administrations in the church. But not a lot of people know about that. Whereas if you have the pulpit, I think that makes a difference. And in our church right now, ordination gives you the pulpit. Now, could we get to a point where you don't have to be ordained to get to the pulpit? How would that be? Well, a woman who is a PhD in a Catholic university, Ilia Delio, teaches at Villanova. She's very much into ecology and non-duality, very educated. Could she be, could they give her the pulpit without having to go through the ordination thing? And so there's various ways that you could maybe get things going. We used to have women preaching in Boulder, by the way. Donna Ryan, who was, goodbye, Karen. Donna Ryan, who was, is still around. Can you believe? I think she just turned 80. She's a Mercy sister, Sisters of Mercy. And she used to preach her turn at St. Thomas Aquinas in the 1980s when I was there. So it's actually in some ways gone backwards. When I was in Knoxville, I remember as pastor, there was a woman there who preached now and again. And she was our Ministry of Education, I think, some education, Sunday school, and she would preach now and again. But it's all gone in another direction for now. Yes.
I do think that the women who are writing can have influence. I was thinking of Joan Chittister, and her books are fabulous. And it's not the pulpit that people who are reading can be influenced by those things. The other thing I was going to mention is the monastery is such a great service to the community. Those retreats are amazing, and I think that there's an increasing need and demand, and I don't know what's happening now, but so many people want to go to Snowmass on the 10-day retreat. And isn't an answer to the question of where the monks are coming from. It's to say that there's a huge need, I think, in the community for those kinds of places to go. And so I really hope that they will continue to be available to people.
Yeah, we have a lot of people, there's a big interest in retreats at Snowmass and other Trappist places, yes. And I think that could continue and is continuing. Right now, we've moved into groups. We can hold 22 tops because a lot of almost all the rooms are 2 people in a room, which is a downside, but that's the way it is. So we have retreat groups come. But when the group leaves, or even when individuals come, when they leave, we have to clean the room and leave it for a certain number of days because of COVID. And then we can let somebody else in. So that means we're getting fewer retreatants than normal, but a lot of things are not normal. So at some point, we tend to get back to it because, again, the guy who's the guest master is not even a monk. We just hired somebody to be guest master. So he takes care of all that. He takes care of the phone calls, he makes repairs, he makes sure there's a room for you, you got your key, whatever. So it can go on, and it doesn't need the other 7 monks to do anything. And now and again, one might go and give a talk. For some reason, he knows some of them, I don't know. But by and large, they love the silence, the stillness, and the beauty of the place. And they come to our, they can come to our mass as long as they wear masks. So we've been doing that for about a month. The public can come to our masses as long as they wear masks. And the bookstore is open, you know, all day long for anybody who wants to come in and shop books and gifts and such. So we'll continue that, as all the monasteries, I think, have retreat facilities. How many they have or don't have. And our retreat facilities, if it's a group, they can sign up and we'll provide cooks. They pay for all that. But if they come on their own, if you come on your own, we give you a room or a little hut, and you have a kitchen, bathroom, bed, etc. But you do your own cooking. We don't feed you. So you go buy your food. So it's a little bit inconvenient for someone who flies into town, doesn't have a car to be there. So they have to figure out how to do that. We don't drive them to the grocery store. So if the guest master does, that's fine. But they have to figure that out when they're coming. So that's a little bit different. I've been on retreats where there's a common dining area for the guests, retreatants, and they eat the same food as the monks. They just bring it over to them. We don't do that. Ours is different. So that's just the way it is. But people tend to know that, and if they don't know that, we tell them before they come. You do your own cooking. That sort of thing. So that's kind of how it goes. Well, I think you've got enough from me for the day. And as right now, if there's no bump in COVID, or we don't all die in 14 days, I think that I'll be back for a talk. I have the room reserved for September 18. Now, I will make a confession so that you know I'm not become a spiritual guru. Why September 18th? Because on September 16th, the Eagles open at the Pepsi Center. And COVID or not, there'll be 25,000 people, of which I will be one, standing cheek to cheek, breathing in the same bad air and having a ball. Now that's the Paulist priest. So, and when the monks say, where are you going? I will simply say, oh, I am going to go do a little maintenance on my office and give a talk, a live talk to the people. And just be on for a couple of days, Abbott. No problem. So it's the Eagles and Pepsi Center. So I said, oh, why don't I teach about that time? So there is a game at 11 o'clock. So you could hear me and walk up to the game. I don't know who they're playing. And 11 o'clock is the time now. But sometimes it might be because, it's probably because of television. And television can change the time. So it's an early game because they want to show it on the East Coast, which means we must be playing a team that is particularly good from the East Coast there. I don't know. Anyway, right now it's 11 o'clock, but we'll still do it at 9. And it looks like we can now Zoom from here. It is going to be recorded on, it is recorded. It's going to be on a YouTube. All you need to do is go to snowmassbookstore.com. No spaces, no caps. snowmassbookstore.com. Hit that, and it will show you right there. Go to this site for the recording. You don't have to go onto YouTube and look it up. It did it for you. Hit that, and it goes to the site on YouTube, and there it is. So that's why we are having it recorded up there, so you can hear it here. And thank you all for your contribution, so I can stay out of debtor's prison and pay my bills, because the Trappists don't pay them for me, believe me. So let us close with a little prayer. We thank you, God, for the great gift of your presence, your acceptance, your love, your compassion. May we continue to grow into the person you have made us to be, that we may be of service to you and to your world. We ask this in your Son's holy name. Amen. Two things from Chris. If you have questions, you can snowmassbookstore.com. It's on YouTube channel by this evening. So wait till this evening. There it is, snowmassbookstore.com. Thank you, Chris. Okay, we're done.
Thank you.
Thank you.